Dr. Nardi here, back with another video. And in this video, we're going to talk about qualitative research. Now, qualitative researchers emphasize that you need to look at the person as a whole and examine a whole experience. And you can't adequately represent the human experience through the measurement or through statistics. That you need to use different techniques such as focus groups, interviews, case studies. And again, you need to underscore the fact that, again, there is no subjective reality, or I should say, there is no objective reality to qualitative researchers, that reality is subjective. So statistics alone will not get you to the correct answer. So qualitative researchers, they don't focus on quantitative analysis, although later on we could talk about how you could do both. They call that triangulation of data. And qualitative research is non-experimental. There is no intervention to be done. And it's really about how you participate or how you observe your research subjects. So remember, there's no manipulation of variables or random assignments. Qualitative researchers also, they reflect. They call it reflexivity, and they think about, the researchers reflect on their own experiences as a part of the research process. Now, qualitative research is a little different because it's more of an iterative process, meaning you might change your design or your method collection as you collect data, where in quantitative research, you already decide ahead of time how you're going to collect data. The other thing qualitative researchers do is they assume that all researchers have potential bias because of their different dynamic in a population, and they understand this, so they take that into account, where quantitative researchers, we try to remove ourselves through statistics, removing that bias. Now, the social sciences is having an ever-increasing approach, or acceptance, I should say, to qualitative research. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, often we do a mixed methods approach where we do qualitative and quantitative data combined, because quantitative data can answer questions that qualitative data cannot, and qualitative data can answer questions that quantitative data cannot alone. Now, you might ask me, where would you potentially see qualitative research? And you could see it in all areas. You could see it in nursing is very popular, education is very popular, some psychology, some sociology, some anthropology. You'll see it in professional practices. And what qualitative research is supposed to do is give you rich insight into human behavior. Again, it could answer questions that a simple survey could not by probing in depth to topics. And if you combine it with mixed methods, then you can get a fuller understanding of the human experience. Now, there are different ways you can collect qualitative data. One way is you can do archival research and document analysis. Now, with this, you're not actually interacting with live participants, and you get access to already existing data that's already been published. It could be newspaper articles, it could be meeting minutes, it could be manuscripts, it could be a diary, it could be electronical sources like photographs, architectural drawings, scrapbooks, audio-visual recordings. Again, it could be a lot of different approaches. And you might ask yourself, who would do such research? And I will tell you that colleges and universities do it, historical societies, the government, corporations, religious organizations. Now, the issue that you kind of run into is that you need to get access to archives with archival research. And you can get public documents, which are open to everybody, so anybody can access those. You can get documents owned by an individual, such as private healthcare records. And you could also get data linked to individuals, and that might require special permission. So again, you have to be aware of how you and if you have access to various records. The thing most important that you need to do is de-identify your data. So you need to remove any personally identifying information especially if you're doing with like health records. You want to follow HIPAA, or the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And remember, qualitative research provides rich information, but collecting the data might be a challenge. Another way that qualitative researchers collect data is through observational methods. Now, there are different types, but one type might be naturalistic observation. And this is where you're observing individuals in their natural setting without any kind of intervention or manipulation. However, I will tell you that there are threats to internal validity to this type of research since you're not controlling anything. Researchers, especially qualitative researchers, remember they're gathering things based on their own perception, and they also bring in their own past experiences into the situation that they're observing. So they always separate their perceptions from their past experience. And they also, when they try to gather data by either writing it down, taking field notes, they try to be as structured and organized as they can. And the other thing they believe is you should not disrupt or interfere with the natural flow of behavior in the setting. Now, often what you want to do, since qualitative research could be somewhat subjective, is you want to get what we call inner rater reliability. And that is basically using multiple raters, and then they come to some kind of consensus on what they're observing. So they might agree upon certain behaviors ahead of time. That way they make sure that when I'm observing it, the other researcher with me kind of notes the same thing. Now, when you're recording data, often researchers are writing stuff down. This could be typing it out. This could be handwritten notes. And what you do is you often make categories of behavior. You could do that ahead of time, actually, so it could be predetermined. And that way you kind of know what to look for, so it kind of guides your observation. You could also do a behavioral coding scheme, and this is where you use a checklist to code target behaviors. So you might be observing a classroom and look for certain behaviors. One thing you should keep in mind is that you want to investigate or review past literatures to see what other researchers have done that were interested in the same or similar topic. And you might want to do a pilot observation in the setting to kind of see if your categories are sufficient. And if they're not, you might want to add some categories or delete some categories. And remember, as a researcher, you're doing kind of this repetitive action by watching participants. However, you want to make sure that you do not have an impact on the participants or the flow of the situation you're observing. Another way you can capture behavior besides taking field notes is using videotape. So you could put up a camera, and you don't need to be there, and usually it's less intrusive. And if you have a videotape or recording, it could be stored and viewed later. But the couple things you have to determine ahead of time is when to videotape, how long to record for, and if you're going to record multiple angles or settings. The other way you can observe is with a real person, and you could have a concealed observer. So it could be a form of passive deceptiveness, and basically maybe you're observing some participants being concealed, maybe trying to blend in. So that is a possibility. The other thing you could do is get participants used to seeing you there. So the observer might spend time in the setting prior to data collection, and then the observed individuals become used to the presence of the observer, and then they kind of forget that the observer is there. As a observational researcher, you have to decide how long you're going to observe for, the frequency of observations, and the interval between observations. Usually want to record, as a basic rule, where the behavior occurred, who acted in that behavior, and exactly what occurred. So that's kind of what you want to keep a track of. And besides a concealed observation, there's also what we call overt observation, and that's observing in a straightforward manner, revealing the purpose and the why you're there as an observer. And then covert observation is where people are being observed, but they're not informed about the purpose of the observation. So they know you're there, they just don't know why you are there. And then there's a whole field of existential sociologists, and they focus on the understanding of the human experience. Another type of research you could do is in ethnography. And this is the study of people and cultures in some kind of systematic manner. And basically, it's examining culture through the relationship of individuals. And this is primarily used by anthropology and sociology. And ethnography really emphasizes exploring the nature of a particular social phenomenon. They don't really test hypotheses. And they tend to work with unstructured data. So they kind of go in and their data collection is very fluid, and it's open to interpretation and change as they're collecting data. Usually they investigate a small number of cases, maybe just one case in great detail. And really that when they analyze their data, they're looking in the interpretation of meaning and function of human actions. Now, there are some hurdles to ethnographies. It might be hard to gain access to the population of interest. And, it really might be building those relationships with the people you're trying to observe. Now, as an ethnographer, you might want to preserve information. And how you do that is you might memorize answers during an informal conversation with your interviewers. You might make quick notes, or you might tape record interviews. Last thing that I mentioned earlier, and I'll bring it back again, is triangulation of data. And this is really about convergent validity, or gaining multiple sources of information to kind of look for some kind of consistent pattern. And it really helps you strengthen your methods in your research study. Now, there's also what we call grounded theory. And this could be top-down research. It's a deductive method of research that involves having a theory, developing a hypothesis based on that theory, and testing this hypothesis. Now, grounded theory is an inductive methodology in which the theory emerges out of a systematic research. And we talk about this as bottom-up processing. Often it's used because it might be too early in the understanding of a given content area to develop a testable hypothesis, or the researcher is interested in the processes that are difficult to approach from a strictly quantitative perspective. Phenomenology is another one, and that's a qualitative approach to the investigation that emphasizes consciousness and just the direct experience. So you're trying to describe the human experience, and you're really trying to clarify lived experiences through a person's everyday life. And you analyze these experiences and you look for themes. And you're trying to understand the whole person and their experiences rather than develop a theoretical framework. And ways that you can collect data, another great way is using focus groups. And these are a kind of interview that has about a small group of people, and they discuss a particular topic with a leader keeping the group focused on a particular topic. And usually you have about 6 to 8, maybe 5 to 10 people, depending on the purpose of the focus group. And usually you pre-select your participants and they have similar backgrounds. And you usually focus the discussion in that group on a specific or limited number of issues. And you might want to try to uncover the range of perspective and experiences. And you really want your group to be led by a trained moderator. And moderators are trained to effectively probe group participation and to identify a broad range of views. And you could do structured interviews. So you might prepare items ahead of time and have a set of predetermined questions. And you want to be very clear when you decide what questions you're going to open up with. Or you might have an unstructured interview, which is basically you don't prepare anything ahead of time and you just ask open-ended questions and you try to have more of a conversation. The other one on this list is semi-structured interviews. And that's where you have a set of predetermined questions, but then you also have open-ended questions. This allows for more degree of flexibility. But whichever method you choose, you should always make sure you have very well-trained interviewers, because that will really affect the interview process. You also have to make the decision if you're going to record or not. Usually recording is good because it frees the interviewer from taking notes. And note-taking might disrupt the flow of the interview. However, if you're recording somebody, it might make your subjects, your interviewees, more cautious, and maybe they'll be less likely to speak on a topic fully. Just a side note, make sure that your sound is good. So if you're recording, you can actually hear the people. And then make sure you always give an informed consent to the participants, letting them know what you're doing, how the data will be stored, where it's going to be collected, and who you'll be disseminating it with. And the last thing I will talk about briefly are case studies. And basically, this is where you explore something in depth, whether it's a person, a program, an event, an activity, or a process. And you might remember some famous case studies from your past psychology courses, like Phineas Gage, where he got a rod through his head, and they wanted to look at the effect of that brain damage on his behavior. There's another one, H&M, where he lost his memory. That was a very, very interesting case study. One thing in mind as you think about qualitative research, and as opposed to quantitative research, qualitative research is more of an emotional experience, not only for the participant, but the researcher. And emotions can be challenging to deal with, like for clinicians and counselors. And you might need to be there to help your team members work through some emotional distress. Anyway, with that said, take care, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.